Story 1. The Fixation. It was the first week of October, and the leaves were just beginning to turn that brittle gold and crimson. My life was routine: work, home, repeat. I was driving home on a Monday, just after the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep indigo. Usually, I pull straight into the garage, but as I turned into the driveway, I saw something pale clinging to the front door. I parked the car and walked up the front path. Taped right over the door handle, secured with a small piece of masking tape, was a plain white envelope. My heart immediately picked up speed. It wasn't junk mail. It wasn't a flyer. Handwritten, in dark blue ink on the front, was my full name. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a single, folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was neat, unsettlingly deliberate. The letter was short, only a few sentences. It stated that the writer had developed an interest in me and wanted to meet. It then specified a location: a small, quiet coffee shop downtown, and a time: 2 p.m. the following day. The following day was coincidentally my day off, which I tried to dismiss as a fluke. What was genuinely disturbing was the tone. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was an unnerving statement of possession, of observance. And it was completely unsigned. I felt a creeping sense of violation. This person knew my name, my address, and possibly my schedule. I went inside, immediately tearing the letter into tiny pieces and throwing it deep into the kitchen trash. I told myself it was a prank. A stupid, sick prank. I tried to forget it, but the image of the handwritten envelope was burned into my mind. I got ready for bed just before 11 p.m. The next day, the day I was supposed to meet them, I stayed inside. I didn't open the blinds. I didn't leave the house. I was paranoid, checking the peephole every time a car drove by. The day dragged on. I made a late dinner, around 8:30 p.m., and immediately felt the need to wash the day's anxiety away. I went upstairs, turned on the bathroom light, and stepped into the shower. The hot water was relaxing, and I started to think I had overreacted. Then the doorbell rang. Bzzzt. A sharp, unexpected sound in the quiet house. I froze, turning the shower off. I pulled the curtain back just enough to listen. Who would be ringing my bell at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday? I stood there, dripping, listening intently. After a minute of silence, I convinced myself they had left. I closed the curtain and turned the water back on. As the shower ran, my mind raced, connecting the dots. The letter. My day off. The missed 2 p.m. meeting. Now the late-night doorbell ring. The feeling of being completely and utterly overthought this was battling the far stronger feeling that I was in actual danger. Then I heard it. A faint, small sound, masked by the running water. Thump. A soft, dull impact. Creak. A slow groan like stressed wood. It sounded like it came from right outside the shower curtain. My blood ran cold. I violently ripped the shower curtain open and lunged out of the tub. Nothing. The bathroom was empty. I dried off in a frenzy, pulling on clothes with shaking hands. I crept downstairs. I had to check the door. I looked through the peephole. The porch was empty. I slowly unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. A small slip of paper fluttered from the crease in the door, landing on the welcome mat. I scanned the street. The neighborhood was dark and silent. Just the wind rustling the skeletal branches of the autumn trees. Eerily silent. I snatched up the paper, locked the door, and unfolded it. It was the same distinct handwriting. This time, the tone was laced with anger, with possessiveness. It accused me of deliberately missing the meetup. It stated that I would regret this slight. At the bottom, this time, they had signed it, DN. My knees went weak. This wasn't a prank. This was a direct, escalating communication from a stalker. He had been at my front door just moments ago. He had been there after I had pulled my car in. I paced the living room floor, feeling exposed. 30 minutes went by, and the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every creak of the house was magnified. I decided I had to report it. I would go to the police first thing in the morning with the note. I needed to sleep. I started heading up the stairs, phone clutched in my hand. As I reached the landing, I heard the sounds again, the soft thump and creak. This time, clearly coming from inside my bedroom. I burst into the room. It was empty. I checked the closet under the bed. Nothing. I closed and locked the main bedroom door. Then I remembered. The master suite had a small, rarely used balcony. I walked toward the glass sliding door that led outside. I always kept the blinds closed, completely forgetting the door was even there. I pushed the blinds aside to check the lock. It was unlocked. I never left that door unlocked. Just as my hand reached for the handle, a dark shape detached itself from the corner of the balcony railing. A figure was standing just outside the door, framed by the moonlight. He was staring directly at me. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He was inside the perimeter. I didn't scream. I just turned and ran. I heard the sliding glass door rattle open as I launched myself out of the room. I flew down the stairs, running out the front door and across the street to my neighbor's house, slamming on their bell repeatedly. The police arrived quickly, but the man was gone. Putting the timeline together with the officers was chilling. The man, DN, must have accessed the balcony while I was in the shower. The thumps and creaks I heard were him closing the glass door. He had been hiding out there, waiting for me to go to sleep. The second set of noises I heard after pacing the living room? He must have slipped back inside the bedroom while I was downstairs, realizing I was still awake, and was waiting in the room when I came back up. But the most haunting realization? When I saw his face in that brief moment, it was familiar. Not a friend or an acquaintance. Just someone I had seen in passing. Maybe at the grocery store. Maybe on the road. The thought that a fleeting, accidental glimpse was enough to ignite this dangerous, escalating obsession and stalk me to my home is a terror that will stay with me forever. Even now, almost a year later, I check the balcony lock every single night. Story 2. The Red Car Ambush. I was on the final, grueling leg of a cross-country drive. 14 hours of road stretched between me and my home on the East Coast. It was 1 a.m. I was running on fumes, fighting the heavy, narcotic pull of sleep. I was on a stretch of dead highway, nothing but asphalt, trees, and the occasional speck of light. The cars that passed me were usually trucks or impatient drivers rocketing by. Then, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. They weren't the blinding LEDs of a modern vehicle. They were dim, yellow, and old. The car took forever to catch up to me. It settled behind me, tailing for what felt like an eternity. Finally, it merged into the passing lane. I kept my eyes forward, letting them pass. But they didn't. I looked over. The car, an old, rusty dark red sedan, was matching my speed precisely. My window was up, but his driver's side window was down. There was one man inside. He wasn't looking at the road. He was staring directly at me. His interior light was on, giving me a clear view of his face. He was pale, his eyes bloodshot, with a fixed, unsettling expression. He just sat there, matching my speed, staring. I tried to slow down. He slowed down, too. I tapped the brakes further. He matched my speed perfectly. I eventually slowed down to an absurd, dangerous pace, about 25 miles per hour on the open highway. Finally, he gave up the bizarre staring game. He kept his speed and slowly pulled away, disappearing down the road. Drunk? Crazy? I didn't know. But the encounter had jolted me fully awake. The adrenaline wore off quickly, and 15 minutes later, I was fighting sleep again. I desperately needed coffee. I saw a sign for a rest stop and pulled off the highway. It was tiny, just a small building with bathrooms and a single vending machine. No one else was there. I parked, ran inside, grabbed a terrible cup of lukewarm machine coffee, and hurried back to my car. As I opened my door, headlights swung into the rest stop. It was the red sedan. My heart seized. He was pulling in right next to me, just like he had done on the highway. I hadn't passed him. I hadn't seen him pull off the road. He must have done something incredibly reckless. Pulled far off the highway to hide, waiting for me to pass, or perhaps he was right behind me, completely unlit. I got in my car and looked over. He was staring. His red eyes were fixed on mine. I turned the ignition, but he started talking. Yelling, actually. Trying to get my attention through the closed window. Then he leaned over and, with an unnervingly friendly gesture, reached across his passenger seat and pulled the door open, motioning for me to get in. His expression instantly shifted from friendly solicitation to a dead, cold stare. I threw the car into reverse and peeled out of the rest stop. I got back onto the highway, but he was right behind me. He immediately merged into the passing lane, matching my speed again, trying to pull up alongside me. This time, I didn't slow down. I started getting aggressive, swerving slightly, trying to keep him pinned in the lane behind me. He matched my aggression. He started accelerating and brake-checking, attempting to force me to pull over. I distinctly remember him attempting a sort of dangerous pit maneuver, trying to clip my rear bumper to spin me out. I maintained control, my adrenaline now a screaming chemical rush. Ahead, I saw the crossover, one of those authorized emergency U-turn spots that allow official vehicles to cross the median and change direction. It was a split-second, illegal, and insane decision. I cranked the wheel, cut across 3 lanes of traffic, and slammed onto the median crossover. I executed the turn and floored it in the opposite direction. I looked in my rearview mirror. His brake lights flared up as he realized what I had done. He paused, sitting right at the edge of the crossover. Then his brake lights went out. He gave up. His headlights continued fading away into the distance in the direction I had just come from. I drove for another hour, shaking uncontrollably, before I found a large, well-lit truck stop where I felt safe enough to stop. For days later, safely back home, I decided to Google local news from that stretch of highway. I found a missing person report from the day before I had been there. A car was found abandoned off the road, right in that remote area. The person was gone with no trace. The only clue the police had was an account from another driver who reported seeing a rusty red car driving erratically near the abandoned vehicle. The terrifying realization hit me like a physical blow. I had been targeted by the same person who likely caused that disappearance. He hadn't pulled over to wait for me at the rest stop. He had gone into the woods to retrieve his car, which he had hidden after his previous attack, and then saw me pull in. Had I slowed down a moment sooner, had I hit my brakes when he attempted the pit maneuver, I would have ended up in the same ditch as his other victim. Story 3. The Cabin Intruder. Last winter, I rented a remote winterized cabin in the mountains of Washington state. It was deep in the Northeast, designed for cold weather, with massive windows and a stone fireplace. The perfect place to enjoy the snow. I arrived before the snow started. But the next morning, I woke up to a blizzard. It snowed heavily all day, keeping me cozy inside, enjoying the fire, and watching the world turn white. Around 9 p.m., I realized I had left a bag of supplies in my car. I threw on my jacket and boots and stepped out onto the front porch. The minute my foot hit the wooden deck, I saw it. Footprints. Large boot prints stamped into the fresh, undisturbed layer of snow on the porch. They were deep and distinct. I followed them with my eyes. They came from the direction of the woods, led directly to the front door, and then turned around and vanished back into the trees. Whoever it was, they hadn't knocked. They hadn't tried to call. They had just walked up to my door, paused, and left. I was slightly unnerved, but told myself it was likely the rental agency checking the pipes or something. I grabbed the bag from the car and went back inside. Over the next 2 days, the snow continued, but every time I checked the porch, there were new, fresh footprints. Always the same pattern. from the woods to the door and back again. They were definitely watching the cabin. On the third day, I decided to investigate. I geared up and walked in the direction the footprints always led. I didn't get far. The woods were thick, featureless, and covered in a blanket of white. With the snow beginning to fall again, I realized my own tracks were disappearing rapidly. I was deep in an unmapped forest. I had to turn back before I got lost. Strangely, for the rest of that day, no new footprints appeared on the porch. I felt a small wave of relief. Maybe whoever it was realized I knew they were there and gave up. I stayed up late that night, past midnight, cozy by the roaring fire. I fell asleep quickly, lulled by the sound of the wind and the soft hush of the snow. I woke up suddenly. It was the middle of the night, perhaps 3 a.m. The silence had shifted. The loud wind was gone. All I heard was the subtle, persistent sound of something crunching in the snow. Crunch, crunch. It was incredibly slow, almost imperceptible. Footsteps. Someone was walking around the cabin, moving with agonizing caution. I sat up, listening. The sound stopped near the back of the cabin, near the wall where the fireplace was. A strange, arrogant confidence washed over me. I wasn't scared, just intensely focused. I told myself I was strong enough to handle this. I quietly slipped out of bed and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was pitch black. The cabin had no hallway lighting. I moved silently to the end of the hall, where the living room and kitchen were. I needed to get to the front door, where my keys were hanging. I took one step into the living room. Thump! A loud, heavy sound directly behind me, back in the dark hallway. My false confidence evaporated, replaced by raw, paralyzing fear. I spun around. In the sliver of moonlight filtering from the living room, I caught a quick glimpse of a large, dark figure moving fast, rushing toward me from the direction of the bedrooms. He was inside. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted toward the front door, snatched the keys from the hook, fumbled with the locks, and ran out onto the porch. I was barefoot. I hit the snow and gravel, running toward my car, screaming. The cabin was silent again. The man wasn't chasing me out into the open. I jumped into the driver's seat. My entire windshield was covered in a thick layer of freshly fallen snow. I couldn't see anything. I was blind. I didn't know if he was standing right in front of the car or still inside. I threw the car into reverse and slammed the gas, following the lines of the driveway in my rearview mirror, backing out onto the remote mountain road as fast as the car would go. I drove for almost an hour until I finally got a faint cell signal to call the police. When the officer arrived, we found the point of entry. A small, forgotten window on the far side of the cabin, near the fireplace, had been forced open. The intruder's path was clear. He had crept in while I slept. He was moving so slowly, so silently, that the tiny sounds of the snow were the only warning. When he stopped by the back wall, he had forced the window open. Then, he went to the other bedroom down the hall, the empty one. The loud thump I heard was likely him realizing the bed was empty and jumping out of the room, charging down the hall to check the only other bedroom, mine. I had left my room at the exact second he was coming out of the wrong one. A difference of 2 seconds, and I would have been face to face with a silent intruder, deep in a snowy wilderness with nowhere to run. It's terrifying to think that one small, quiet sound, one brief moment of realization, was the only thing that saved me that night. Host/narrator. In all 3 accounts, the victims survived due to extreme vigilance and the will to make a dangerous escape. But the terror lies in the knowledge that these stalkers were relentless, coordinated, and possessed a level of fixation that is almost impossible to comprehend. If these true stories chilled you to the bone, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. Let me know in the comments. If you were the driver of the red car, what would be your most immediate move once you realize the danger? Stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll see you next time.